Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul, and I am a nerd, and this is the June 2013 Worldox Virtual User Group Meeting, a public service of Attorney Computer Systems. Today we are talking about columns, how to get them organized the way you want them to be, and more importantly, how to make that stick, and the button bar. I'm going to talk about the button bar, and first we're going to hear from Mary Jo about columns, but before we do anything with that, we're going to do a little housekeeping, and we're going to talk about the GoToWebinar control panel that you're looking at a replica of right here. If you are seeing something like this on your screen other than my visual representation of it, then you have not clicked this button, because clicking this button that looks like arrows pointing to the right will force this out of the way and will make room for everything else that you would want to see underneath it, most notably my screen. Once you do collapse the GoToMeeting control panel, this button turns into one that looks more like arrows pointing to the left, because when you click it again, this will come back into focus. Why would you want this to come back out? So that you can type a question right here, where our humble and poised moderator, and calm, I might add, Leanne, will recognize that you have asked a question. She will interrupt Mary Jo or me at the proper time, and she will ask your question on your behalf. Now, be sure that if you don't get your answer fully, or that you don't get everything answered the way you want it, just keep typing questions until you're done, and Leanne will keep asking them on your behalf. So be sure to continue to augment your question as we are answering it, in case there's something that we're missing or something that you're not hearing that you want an answer to. If you are feeling a little bit more bold, you can always press this button here, which looks like a hand with an arrow pointing upward in front of it, which of course means raise your hand. And pressing that button will cause Leanne to be alerted with an electric shock that we have inserted into her chair, which will wake her up and cause her to interrupt Mary Jo or myself at the appropriate time and unmute you so that you can ask your own question. And so without any further ado, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to turn it over to Mary Jo, who's going to tell us more than we ever wanted to know. Well, maybe not. Everything we ever wanted to know about columns. Mary Jo?
Okay. Columns up at the top obviously can be sorted by just clicking on the various headings. So most of the time we want it sorted by our most recently modified documents. So our most current documents are up here at the top. But you might want to sort it by description or document type just by clicking on any of these gray areas at the top. That's a column. You can sort by those documents there. So now I've got all my emails together, my PDFs, and my Excel documents. If you want to sort by description, same thing. Very easy to just sort through these columns by clicking, and you can reverse the order by clicking it again. That's pretty standard. A lot of times people want to move these columns around. You might want to resize them. Maybe your descriptions are quite long. We've got one on here that's a long description, and if my column was shorter, I wouldn't be able to see it. So we've got these little brackets that when I highlight over, I can shorten and make that column width different. You can see I've got a gap here now, so I can then move over my doc ID, and I can move all my columns over here and make those columns different sizes and different positions. If I wanted doc ID in front of description, I can just drag it over, and I can make these different orders as I want here. So that's the basic. We can do those things. But what if you want to add a column? Maybe you want to have the date that it was created. If I click in any of these gray areas, you can see I've got several between here now that I've moved these columns. So I've got these gray areas. I can right-click on that, and I can come down here to insert a column. One other thing real quick I'll talk about since it's on the screen. The best fit for all columns, if you don't want to sit here and drag and do that, you can start with the best fit, and then you can start dragging and making those different lengths and widths. But to insert a column, we're just going to click on the Insert column. And then you've got all these different choices of different columns that you can insert. There's categories, there's comments, dates, and the date created is underneath the date. So the one I want to add is right here. But there's several other choices. There's some from the profile group, and some of these are already on the screen. Some may not be. If you want the client ID, the code, that could be on there, or the description is already there. If you want the actual matter description or the matter code, you could have that, doc type. All of these things are choices. You can kind of look through here and decide what you want to add. But in my example, we're going to add the date created. So I'm just going to click on that, and it's going to add that column. And so now I've got this date created here column. I can move it over a little bit so that it's right in front of the modified, whatever I want, and I can best fit these and throw them out, and then I would have my columns. Now the biggest question we have is, I save this. If I right-click on this and I hit Save Column Template, you would think that it was saving this whole column, and the next time I come in it would be there. But that's not the case. It's just saving this template for this session that you're in. If you want this to save permanently and you want this to always be your column layout, you need to click this little Save button over here. This is the Save Styles. And when you save the styles, that will change it, and it'll give you these options if you want to save the columns in these orders and all of that. And then what list do you want this column layout to apply to? Do you want it for your favorite files? When you open favorites, do you want that same column layout headings at the top? Relations, salvage bin, any of these different things that you want to have that same column headings for, you can check that off. If you're a manager, you can also do this for everyone. So you can mass change these columns and just push it out to everybody. And when they log into Worldox the next time, then everyone will see those changes you made. If it's just for you, you have your own personal settings that you want, you can just do for only me. And if you're not a manager, this is the only selection that you would have. If I hit Save, that's going to go out and it will save these column layouts for me for every time I log in. So that is how you can move things around. You can add columns. You can take columns off. If you want to remove the column, if I don't want the version number, I can remove that column off my list. So there's a lot of different things here, but just remember that to save it permanently, it's the Style Save right here.
Where's that, Mary Jo? Because I'm not seeing where your cursor is moving when you say the Style Save.
The Style Save, there's a little box right up here. You can see I don't know if you can see my cursor, the red X when I close out my files, right above Client Description. There's the little filters, and then there's the little Save.
Oh, I see it now. Thank you.
Okay, that's the Style Save. There's also underneath List, no, it's under Display. If you go to Windows Styles, it's over there as well for the Save. So under Display, Windows Styles, Save. But it's also just this little Save over here next to the red X here. Now I'm going to cancel it because I really don't want to save those because we have our own set columns here. But had I saved that, that would be there for the next time. Any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Paul?
Okay. Well, Mary Jo alluded to the fact that this button here represents something that also appears up here under Display. And I'm going to talk about this button bar here, which also includes things that appear up here in the menu. Now, in the old days, and I can attest to this because I'm very old, we used to just have menus. We didn't really have button bars until a couple of years later when somebody said, boy, those menus are hard to get around. And so button bars were something that were created so you could very quickly click on a button without having to dig through layers of menus and find the option that you were looking for. And of course, being up there, people got used to clicking on them and understood what these things represented. Now in version 3, would you call it version 3? I'm sorry, in GX3 from Worldox, I guess that's not really version 3, but we won't go there. They introduced the ability to have a lot of control over this button bar. It used to be that the button bar was pretty much the way you see it laid out here, and that was that. Now, one of the things they allow you to do now is to add or remove buttons from the button bar. So if you say, well, gosh, I never click on this button right here, you could remove it by right-clicking on the button and choosing Remove Button. Another thing that they did, you'll notice when you hover over buttons that it pops up this little help text to tell you what each of these buttons means. But a lot of people have asked over the years, and I guess Worldox was listening because they've added the ability to have this text show up. Now, one of the biggest questions we get when we do a new install of Worldox is, where's my text? How come my text isn't on my buttons? Mary Jo next to me has text on her buttons, and I'm not talking about this that you're seeing now, but text right under the button. Why don't I have it? Well, one of the things we found as GX3 came out is that it'll only show up if there's enough room. So if we remove this button, bam, there's the text. If we get this to a point where it's got so many buttons along here that in order to make them fit, it's going to shrink them down and not have enough room for the text, then the text isn't going to fit. Now, another thing is that if you come in here and look at the font for the buttons, you do have some control over how big it is and what font style it is. So if you find that you're not getting text, one of the first things you can do is you can right-click on one of the buttons, choose Change Button, Fonts, and you'll be able to shrink that down just a little bit, that text down, and that might cause your text to appear without having to remove a button. Now, another thing that you have control over here is what order they're in. Let's say that instead of having comments in list here, we want it in front of or to the left of navigation panel. All we have to do is right-click and choose Move Button Left. And of course, we can move button right. So you can move these buttons around to your heart's content. I will tell you, if you're going to take this button and move it all the way over here, you're going to be there for a couple minutes because you have to move it each time that it goes. And if I move it right now, it's not going to move to the left of list versions. It's going to move to the left of this divider. More on that in a second. I'm going to very quickly move my button back to where I want it. And then I'm going to talk about these dividers. Another thing we can do is we can append what's called a separator. So if I wanted a separator right to the right of the navigation panel, bam, there it is. And I can remove it by right-clicking on it. Now, when we get out of this view where we're kind of in the button bar, you'll notice that these separators come in very handy. They put the check out and check in their own little section of the button bar. They put copy and move in their own little section. So they're very nice to group these things according to their functionality. But of course, overusing them can detract from that. Now, to append a button, we simply right-click in one of the gray areas right here where you are not on a button itself. And we choose Append Button, and we get all the different things that appear up here in your menu. So you can take any menu item, and when you go into Append Button, you simply choose whichever menu item it appears under. So if we wanted that thing that Mary Jo showed us about being able to get into window styles and save a window style, right there. And now I have appended the button. I have complete control over what the text says, and now I have saved there. Now, that is a perfect example of when you might want to change the text on a button. If I put the text that normally would appear with this button, because it's the same text that appears when we hover over there, if I put that text on a button up here, it implies that you're going to save a document. At least it does to me. So I might come in here and change the button and change the text and change it to Save Style. And now it has text that indicates exactly what it means when it's in the context of being up here on this button bar with all these other buttons. Now, one other thing that you can change, if we go into Change Button and Icon, we have, maybe a page and a half of different icons that you can use for the buttons. So if you don't like the icon that's used to represent this, you can come in here and search through these, and there's a pretty good chance that you might find another icon that is more appropriate to what you want it to look like, that looks more like what you want that particular button to look like. Now, you are, of course, limited here. I haven't done any research into whether or not you can add icons here, except to find out that if you can, it's not very obvious how you do that. I have not gone any farther than that because no one has asked me to. But you could change this from that to maybe the old-fashioned Worldox. This used to be the Worldox icon, or the Worldox logo, and so now we've changed the icon to that. So to summarize, you can remove a button like this by right-clicking on it and choosing Remove Button. You can edit the text right there. You can change the icon. If you need to fit text in and you don't have enough room, one of the things you can try is changing the font either to something that's a little bit smaller. Arial Narrow, for instance, is a font that, and I don't see it here. That's odd. Not so much for that. Arial Narrow, I'm pretty sure, is on my computer, so maybe we're limited here in the fonts that we can include. But by changing the size, we can get a little bit more room there. Close that up. We can add a new button by doing that and choosing which menu it appears on. Keep in mind these menu items here, or these items here on this list, replicate the menu items, and as you highlight one, you get into the ability to drill down to further levels until you get to the item that you want. And you can tell it whether or not you want to, well, you can't really tell it whether or not, but if we append enough buttons, let's do that, eventually what's going to happen is there we go, is that our text is going to go away. So if we run into a situation where we don't show the text, it's because we've got too many buttons for the size window that we've got, or for the amount of real estate we've got, and all we need to do is remove a few of the buttons that we don't really want on there. So I'll take that out, and I will take that out, and now I'm back to where I was. Any questions, Leanne? Okay. Leanne says there are no questions, so that must mean it's time to stop. Now, if you do come across questions later on, please let us know. You can always email me at paul.purdue@attorneycomputersystems.com. We do have people working round the clock to try and come up with a longer email address, but for now that's all we have. Paul.Purdue, like the school, not the chicken, P-U-R-D-U-E, paul.purdue@attorneycomputersystems.com. You can email Mary Jo as maryjo.boyd, and Mary Jo is all one word, maryjo.boyd@attorneycomputersystems.com. You can call us at 1-800-475-8104, or you always have the option, you always have the option to go to our website, attorneycomputersystems.com, and click on any of the virtual user group meetings that we have over here on our left panel. We also have a series of webinars that we call the Coffee Pot. We have Mary Jo's infamous eBytes video series, and we have, my daughter asked me the other day, she said, do you really call it the Paul and Mary Jo Show? And I said, yes, Katie, we really do call it the Paul and Mary Jo Show. So you can come here and go to this place, and it's where you can register for the, if it's a webinar or a user group meeting, you can register for the next scheduled session. We don't present these live, so you won't see a registration link on these links. But then, of course, you have all the recorded versions we have. This is the third Worldox virtual user group meeting that we've given. We do also work a lot with Practice Master and tabs. You'll notice those, we have quite a bit of content recorded because we've been doing those for about 3 years. And then, of course, as I said, we have the infamous Paul and Mary Jo Show and the eByte video series. So all of this content is available to you on our website. So if you ever find that you cannot attend one of the virtual user group meetings and you still want to be able to see it, A, if you register for it, we will tell you with an email when it's available here. But B, even if you don't register for it, you can always come back, and at some point, usually 2-3 days after it's been performed or it's been held, you will find that content show up here. And last but not least, next month at our July Worldox virtual user group meeting, we will be talking about tags, which is a way to kind of drill down and filter your document list to show you certain things based on tags, and projects, which is a way to pull documents together into something called a project, and these documents don't have to be from the same case or the same matter. So it's a kind of a neat way to pull shortcuts to a bunch of documents that are in some way related together into what we call a project. So until then, have a good afternoon and a good month, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.